All right, welcome back, everybody. Looking forward to today. I hope the breakout rooms went well. And let's see, other things of note. I think we'll do a couple of quick, just 1-minute highlights and overviews of two of the people in the group, and I get to pick those, so it's always fun. Chris Dayton, I'm wondering if you could give us a 1-minute introduction to yourself so everybody in the group gets to meet you and know you a little bit. And then you can pick the next person to do the update or the introduction.
Ooh, okay. Pressure's on, but thank you. My name's Chris Dayton, and I've been coming to these a few times, not as often as I'd like, but I've enjoyed them and getting to meet those of you that I have. I'm with a company called Mercury Global Care. We have a software in the healthcare space that helps medical groups identify and treat chronic ill patients. So we're excited about that now that we're able to kind of get back and have those conversations that aren't necessarily COVID related. But the primary focus I've had over the last year has actually still been in technology, but it's been in the payment space. And we've got a technology that helps merchants see their data, be able to analyze it and use it for their business. The payment space is notorious for low service and low data and reporting capabilities, and our platform kind of sheds a whole new light to that, which is one reason why I enjoy these meetings, and especially today's topic, because I know you're going to be dealing with data and how companies can use that. So I'm excited, looking forward to that. I don't see a ton of people yet on this, but I'll turn it over to Jeremy, who was in my breakout room, and I had bad connection, so I didn't get to hear all of it. So an extra minute with Jeremy would be a huge bonus for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Did you mean for next week or right now for me?
1-minute introduction right now.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So Jeremy Porter. Yeah, I've been on these kind of hit or miss for the past couple months, but background is in business development and corporate development with some venture work, primarily all in the healthcare space. Currently doing some consulting work for a hearing benefits company. They sell hearing aids to health plan members, looking at other opportunities, strategic opportunities for growth for them. So it's my
Very
1 minute.
cool. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Chris. Okay, we'll jump into our weekly expert presentation today. I'm super excited about it because Tim Kapp from Carry On Intelligence was actually one of my first bosses coming out of my undergraduate work. So he was an amazing boss, and I have gotten to work with him on and off since then, and pretty excited to hear the presentation. I went through it with him earlier, and it's going to be awesome. So Tim, I will let you share your screen, and just as a reminder for everybody, please throw any questions or comments into the chat while Tim's presenting, and then we'll have some good Q&A and discussion afterwards, but feel free to throw any questions into the chat while the presentation's going on. Tim, feel free to share your screen, and we can see the notes section right now, not the presentation, and you can give some background on yourself as well. You're also muted, Tim. Uh-oh. Oh, no, Tim's still here.
Something in Zoom froze my mouse. So, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, let's try this one more time. You might see a
Jeff says this only happens when you're the presenter.
It only happens when I'm the presenter. Can you see?
We can see your amazing desktop.
Yeah, with all how messy it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need more files on there.
This literally has frozen this has literally frozen my entire desktop. Give me one second here. It's not like I don't do this for a living, right?
I'm sure your students love it when this happens though.
It has never, ever happened. I've never seen this.
In Tim's defense, he's analyzing petabytes of data in the background as he's doing this presentation.
Okay, we're going to get this to work this time.
I'm still excited for the presentation.
All right.
This is just building suspense.
I know, it's awesome.
It's okay. Can you see it now if I expand it?
Yeah, we can see your desktop, so
Are we
there you
good?
go.
Yes.
Okay, I am sorry. I've never had that happen before. And I do this every day. All right, so let me quickly, Taylor said we've got 10 minutes. I am new to this, and so hopefully we'll get through this format really quickly. I've got a lot to share. I'm also excited to share this with you. As Taylor said, I first met Taylor when we were running a company called Bay Hill Capital, and we were doing strategy and investing at that time. And Taylor, I found out that Tyler was one of your students. So I found out today I have a grandson now. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about, I'll tell you quickly who I am. I'm a partner currently in a company called Carry On Intelligence. The company was founded in Europe and is now in the US, so we're launching it in the US. My specialty is predictive analytics, and I teach that as well, predictive analytics and AI and automation at the University of Utah. So I kind of have one foot in both worlds right now. Most of my time is spent actually working with big companies or even smaller companies implementing predictive analytics, AI, automation, those kinds of things. But I also see the academic side of it quite often. We have a few partnerships, so we work typically through partnerships. We work with Taylor and Summit. In Silicon Valley, we have a partner, Adventary, and we also have other partners, in specialized areas like Publisher Arts, who specializes in media and entertainment. So that's a little bit about me. Again, we're going to go very quickly. So I want to talk about why digital disruption or a lot of people use the phrase digital transformation. I hate that phrase, especially because most of us are in smaller companies or mid-sized companies. We're not transforming something that's 40 years old. We're inventing something new and trying to disrupt the industry. So I like digital disruption. And just very quickly, I put a link at the bottom. All of these quotes are in the link and all of the sources are in that link if you want to take a look at it, or we'll send this later. But I just want to show you this. This is a random sample or a quick sampling of the kinds of things that I'm seeing happening in the industry and the kinds of quotes that I'm getting from analysts on a daily basis. So AI, part of the data infrastructure. We'll talk about that whole, what does the whole data world look like? AI is going to power 95% of customer interactions by 2025, including live conversations. 38% of US jobs are at risk of automation by early 2030s. Labor productivity should be boosted by about 40%. These technologies are going to replace 16% of US jobs, but also create 9% of new jobs. RPA, which is another small area in the data world that we're going to talk about, stands for robotic process automation, has already replacing 10 to 20% of existing jobs in the US. If you're in banking and finance, you're probably very aware of this. The banking and finance industry will lose 10% of their jobs starting in 2018. They're already 2/3 the way through the process. COVID has masked some of those losses that people are just assuming it's related to COVID and things, but there are massive losses in finance as they're automating. By 2024, organizations will lower their average cost, their operational cost by up to 30% through hyper automation and redesigned operational processes. This is the kind of thing Garrett, I know, is working on. And AI and data is a huge part of that. So those are I'm just, again, sampling some of the impacts. The opportunity for all of you, what I'm hearing from big companies is they're scared to death right now because they realize it's as hard for them to transform an existing business as it is for a very small company to come into their business and disrupt them completely. So it's interesting. I've never seen CEOs so scared about small companies coming in and disrupting them. So just some thoughts in here. 77% of CEOs say AI and automation will increase their vulnerability to disruption in their industry. 63% say pressure will force them to use AI and automation to reduce costs. 93% feel completely unprepared or only partially prepared to tackle the challenges related to these technologies. 83% said AI is a strategic priority for their business, but only 23% have even started incorporating AI into processes and product and services. So they all know it's big. They all recognize it. The analysts all know it's big, but companies are just scratching the surface of what can be done. And the interesting one, try a query on this sometime. They're calling it the rise of the fully automated business, where people are starting to imagine and launch businesses that are literally fully automated. They have one employee, the founder, and they're doing some incredible stuff. And you might think that that would be incredibly hard to do. It's surprising how many are out there. And if you just think about it, we're already seeing a lot of it. We just don't think of that way. Already, when's the last time you talked to a Google employee? When's the last time you talked to someone at Amazon? And those companies obviously have thousands of humans on the back end, but everyone's trying to figure out how do we run in as automated as way as possible. So here are the big questions, and then then I'm going to jump into a kind of a framework to discuss what is digital disruption anyway. So the questions you want to be asking yourselves are, how far off would those predictions, analyst predictions are always off by a ways, but how far off would those predictions have to be and still make AI and automation the single biggest and fastest source of disruption to the industry, every industry, since the internet? Big question number 2 is, what data-driven capability would scare your largest competitors? If you had if you could use one data in one specific way, how could you use it to scare your biggest competitors? And the last one that I keep asking people is, this is happening right now. It started, it's been hidden. It's kind of been, the lower part of the iceberg in a lot of industries. This started in it started further back than that, but it really started hitting its stride in 2018 in certain industries. In most industries, there were bits of this emerging last year, and in every industry I've talked to, and we're going to see some crazy ones, there are some elements where people thinking about, how do I use data to redefine and disrupt my industry? So the third question is, what are you doing about it right now? Literally, what are you doing this month or in the next 6 months? Because this is an innovation that's going to happen far faster than stuff we've seen in the past. So to do all this, we've put together a framework. We can't cover the entire framework. This takes 6 months to go through the framework with clients. But let me show you the steps in the framework, and then we'll talk about one specific element of the framework that I think will help you kind of imagine what can be done. So when we go in and work with a business, we always start with strategy, business strategy, not data strategy. And we figure out what the business strategy is, and then how to translate the business strategy into a data strategy. So we have a whole framework around that. We don't have time to talk about it today, but the second one is, we then say, okay, given that strategy, where do you have to be world-class? What 2 to maybe 5 capabilities have you got to be world-class in? And still ignore the data, or ignore, in AI and that kind of stuff. I want to know what the business needs to be world-class in to dominate the industry. And then we'll figure out the data capabilities that match that strategy. Then we do an audit. We say, okay, do you have the data you need to enact your strategy? Or if we got to go find some stuff or build some stuff? I don't even worry about finding data or building things until I'm at that third level. A lot of companies, that's one of the first places they start, and I think that's a reason for failure. Then and only then do we look at resource strategy. So how do you engage the specialized talent that's required? That's a big one, and that's another big stumbling block we'll see. The fifth one is, how then do you build it incrementally and iteratively? And the last one is, how do you deploy it? This is one of the big steps that a lot of people ignore. You've got legal, ethical issues, you've got launch issues, you've got monitoring issues, you've got maintenance issues. And I teach my students at the U that for various reasons, in a data application, the data is the code. And when data is the code, that means it's constantly changing, which means it's exponentially more difficult to prevent data hacks or data problems than it is software hacks. And you might not believe me. If you went through this framework with me, I'd show you companies that didn't believe that and what the price they paid. So here are the top 3 reasons I'm hearing from analysts. I didn't make these ones up, but the analysts are telling me this is where they're seeing major failures in companies that are trying to transform or trying to follow some kind of process. Number one, they're taking a technology first approach rather than a strategy first approach. This is the first thing that most companies do wrong, is they start trying to say, what data do we have? What cool stuff could we do? Or someone walks in and said, I've heard about AI, let's do some AI stuff. That is the wrong way to go about this. You've got to start with the business strategy. So all of you are or a good portion of you are the business strategists in your company. So if you're waiting for someone like me to help or to define the strategy or tell you what AI is going to do for you, I'm step 2 or 3. I'm down the list. You need to be thinking about what is the core strategy of the company and what are the capabilities we need to build, and then figure out how data applies to that. Second place people fail is they fail to build incrementally and iteratively. So most companies get this big vision of what AI can do, and they invent a whole new company in their heads, and they find out only too late that it takes too long, it's too costly, or their definition is way too broad. The companies that are succeeding, in fact, the analysts have termed this the transformation burnout, because they're finding companies are just tired after 6 months of working, overtime to keep systems up, and ripping systems out and ripping your databases out. Employees just get tired. You've got to get to innovation faster than ripping out your systems. In fact, that's one of the big issues. You're doing this wrong if the first thing your IT person says in your first step in your digital transformation is to rip out all of your databases. Databases don't add value. Applications add value. They might need data and databases, but a customer is never going to see your database. Then the third one, and I know we're going quickly, but the third one is resource strategy. As I'm going to show you in a minute, there is no such thing as a data scientist. And I keep telling my students, do not claim that you're a data scientist, because there is no such thing as a data scientist. Data science is probably 30 different specialties. And if you are trying to hire a single person to do data science in your firm, you probably got it wrong already. Or the other failure I see is that you're hiring a student who's the CEO's nephew, who's been around for a little, seems like a really smart kid and is graduating in data science. That's where you're going to fail. It's not, I love those kids. Those are the kids I'm teaching right now. But you need to look for specialists in most areas. Okay. So this is not the framework. Let me, these are the steps that we usually take several months to go through with a company and help them with those steps. I'm going to show you just this portion of it. Just identifying the data capabilities you need in that your strategy requires. And we're barely going to scratch the surface on that. But I want to give you a framework to think about data and data science that I think will help you kind of simplify this process. So this is the big question I always ask. People say, I hate the word digital transformation, because what does data even mean? What does digital even mean? So let me give you a framework for understanding that. First of all, there's big data, and that's a term we've all heard. And that includes, catchphrases like data lakes and warehouse design and compliance with GDPR and cloud architecture and graph databases are a hot new thing. Data wrangling is thrown in that, data, pipes and stuff. All of the infrastructure, I just throw it all in there. And you don't need to worry about the infrastructure. You just need to know that this is it answers the question, how do we manage and access your data? How do we move stuff? How do we manage it? How do we access it? Okay, so I just throw everything into data, big data. Underneath is a rapidly emerging area, and I'm going to call that raw feeds, and that's where the data is collected. So the reason it used to be, I used to just throw this in with big data because most of your data is created from applications, but suddenly we've now got medical devices, we've got IoT devices, we've got satellite feeds that we can get readily. We've got sensors coming from agriculture. We've got medical device sensors. We've got web scraping, and then all kinds of data enhancement services. Just API companies that are nothing more than an API out there that will allow us to grab data, match it with our data, and enrich our own data. So I'll call those raw feeds. And then the next layer builds on those. So each layer builds on the other. And this layer I like to frame as kind of past and future. So in the past, if you're looking at answering the question, what did happen? You've got what I would call business intelligence applications. And this has been an area of growth for the last 5, 10 years. This is where data visualization lives. This is where dashboards live, data analysis. Okay, so a lot of people have talked about dashboards. A lot of you have probably implemented dashboards. But dashboards, by their very nature, still only answer what did happen. They're looking backwards. Now, another term I hate, but you're going to hear it, is hyperautomation. And this answers the question, how it happens. How does the work happen? And in here, I throw general automation. I throw RPA, which is, again, robotic process automation. Process mining is a brand new term that is emerging quickly, where you're using AI to monitor and actually analyze and discover the processes in your business based on the logs from your computers. It's a fascinating new market that's emerging. And then there's some AI elements in here that like chatbots and natural language processing, natural language generation, how do you handle customer calls, things like that I would also throw in the how it happens category. So these are all automations. Then the next category is where I live. Most of my world is in predictive and descriptive analytics. And we answer the question there, what will happen or why it happened. And so we do classifications, is something an A or a B? Someone was talking about identifying, what category a patient might fall into. Given certain characteristics. So that's classification. We build predictive models around COVID all the time. I've seen a number of these coming from hospitals. Regression analysis answers the question, how much or how many. Cluster analysis answers, what belongs together. So an example would be customer segmentation. What customers belong together? Outlier analysis. So this is audits audits and risk management type applications, and then association, what kinds of things happen together. So recommendation engines for shopping and e-commerce, things like that. So all of that fits in that world. And then there's an emerging new world right on there on the end called prescriptive analytics, where we take everything we learned from the other three and turn it into decision models. And I'll give you examples of all of these. I'll run you through some real examples, but this is a new area where we're saying, not only can we predict something, but I'm going to tell you what the best course of action is. And then finally, just quickly, that's where this little box, AI, machine learning, deep learning, those are all terms you've heard, kind of live a little bit in automation, but primarily in predictive and prescriptive. And then lastly, there's just functional applications that sit on top. They're built on top of all of these models, but things like anything to do with RevOps, like customer retention, customer churn, customer segmentation, e-commerce recommendation engines, those kinds of things are functional areas that are all built on top of this. And then you've got industries where it's applied. So you've got industry experts I'm working with people that are dealing with video on demand, gaming, logistics, app engagement. We've even had people call us from pet supplies. Our company is currently working on intelligent hubcaps with a partner. So you can imagine if we've got pet supplies and intelligent hubcaps we're helping this partner build hubcaps that identify wobble in a tire and communicate it back to the mothership and say, this tire is about to blow because it's wobbling too much or it's heating up too much. So every industry is getting disrupted right now. So I hopefully that helps a little. Let me show you quickly how we take a company through our framework. And again, this is super high level. One thing I tell them, first of all, is everything in those categories, your databases and your business intelligence, your dashboards, those are table stakes now. Okay, those will not differentiate you or make you a better company. If you don't have those in place now, you're already well behind. Differentiation's coming in these areas. And so typically your strategy is going to be one of those top areas: hyper automation, predictive, prescriptive analytics, or possibly getting great data feeds. So let me give you some examples. So when we walk a company through this process, this is an example of a packaging company. The first, at a very high level, the question we're really asking is, what's going to scare your competitors? And their answer was speed and convenience. Their problem: companies could not get packaging. They couldn't get a bid back fast enough. They'd call in for a bid for a brand new product, and it would take 3 to 4 weeks to get bids back to an accurate bid back. So they asked the question, what if we could get bids back in 5 minutes that were accurate enough, accurate within 95%, so they didn't even have to go to part this thing out and get bids back. They could just guess, and the AI could guess how good it was. No sales interaction at all. The customer could do a self-help system and have a bid within 5 minutes. That was the challenge. We did an audit. We said, okay, the data does exist, but we got to get it from somewhere. It's somewhere in the company, but it's going to take a little, laying some pipes to find it. And then we identified 4 specific models that could build that capability. We had an AI-driven decision tree that could help basically play 20 questions with the customer, help them answer the right questions. It could predict the price based on those questions, it would predict the price based on those questions. We threw in a little extra thing that we discovered called customer price sensitivity. We could determine whether a customer is actually price sensitive or not based on previous bids, and you could bump up the price or bump down the price depending on their sensitivity. So it's basically auto negotiating for you based on the customer's personality profile. And then finally, at the very end of this process, there's a recommendation engine which does an upsell to the customer. It says, here's the next 3 things the customer is likely to buy given what they want. Here are 3 upsell possibilities. Okay, so 4 models we identified for them. Then we identified a very clear iterative sprint plan where we only focused on the predictive pricing and still had all the human interaction involved. And then we are currently working on how would we actually go through deployment. So the legal, the launch, the monitoring, things like that. And then one other quick example and we'll be done, but do we have time for this, Taylor?
Yeah, if you go quick and then we can do some Q&A.
Okay, we'll go really quick. So this is a telco we're also currently working with. This is a large international telco. And we asked them essentially the same question: what would scare their competitors? And they have this thing in telco called OTT. The term stands for over the top, which means services that they can layer on top of all their bandwidth. And so gaming, video on demand are the big OTT services. And so they said, if we could better segment and understand gamers and video on demand streamers, we would be ultra competitive. So we said, okay, to get that, they want to do a micro segmentation of heavy gamers and video on demand users. That required some unsupervised learning, some cluster analysis, but more importantly, we had to do some automated data classification. So we can see, they can see, I can't. They can see all of the websites that their customers are visiting. Okay, they can see every URL that their customers are visiting. based on those URLs, they ask us to basically create a personality profile and segment those customers into hundreds of small segments that we could identify what's most interesting to each of those customers, or who are they most like. And then they could group, once we group those customers, we could say, okay, these ones need this specific kind of thing offer, these ones need a different offer, these ones need a different offer. So for example, I'm currently working on a gaming analysis, and we're segmenting gamers based on based on their websites they visit, right down to the level of, I know who the RPG players are versus the professional players versus the, other types of players. And now they can make offers based on that. They did have the right data. What they needed was a taxonomy and some external data to help us define what those sites are. They had URLs, but no one had categorized what all those websites were. So we built another AI system that is tagging those sites. In this case, they've got a great internal data team, but they weren't specialists in this area. So their internal data team does the core data ops. They hired us to come in and do the AI-driven classification models. And it works out really well because they really don't need us forever. They need their core team to run the ops. They just need us to define it and build it. We built a proof of concept, and that proof of concepts has already proven valuable. They found partnerships, strategic partnerships off of that. And they even identified 3 new segments that look like very productive segments for them. We found a segment that we're calling the traders, because they trade stock all day. That's how segmented these things came out. We were able to pick out the people that are constantly trading stocks and doing research on stock. We were able to pick out the students quite easily. And then they found a new segment of seniors that were wonderful because they don't do a lot. They really don't use up a lot of data, but they're some of their most loyal customers. The ideal customer you want costs you very little, stays with you for a long time, doesn't go anywhere. And so they want to figure out how to find more of those. And then again, deployment and launch, we're not even worried about deployment. This shows you how powerful a good iterative model is. We got done with the POC, and the POC is adding so much value right now that they decided to do a bunch of other projects before finalizing the PO, or before going to the next phase. So they're asking us to do further game segmentation, things like that. So that's the process. Again, this in real life, this takes a lot longer than that, but that's the general process that we take people through. And hopefully some of that helped. Hopefully that data framework at least helped you frame what questions each kind of technology can help you answer. So where do we go next? Just a couple thoughts. We're going to be working with Taylor probably on a Midday Connect execution sprint that Taylor's been teaching me about, and I think he shared that with most of you, but any of you are welcome to contact me. I love meeting with companies. I love seeing what the innovations are. And then the last thing, I'm trying to convince the U of U to take my current courses on the road in a version that's catered more towards executives and less on for developers. So I can teach executives exactly what you can do with predictive analytics and AI and automation and what it's going to do to your business. So I think through Taylor, we can communicate if that becomes available. But in the meantime, either one of those first 2 bullets, I think I'd love to talk more with you about it. Taylor, I'm going to let you take over for Q&A.
Thanks so much, Tim. That was awesome. I'm happy to keep the Zoom room open for another 15 minutes or so for discussion and Q&A. I think Jeff and Shane had a couple of questions that coincided in the chat. So if it might be quicker, Jeff and Shane, if you just unmute yourselves and kind of give some context to those questions in the chat.
Sure. Mine might be really easy because it might not apply to me, but as like a really small business owner, professional service provider, I'm an attorney, and I always hear this stuff, and I deal with inventors all the time who are inventing really cool crap around this. But I always think, how would I take this and use this in my business? And
Okay.
I'm going to barge in on Shane's question and say, and what's the budget for that when you do that, right? Is that Like, do I need to put down 50K or 250? Like, what is the number to say, come in and help me figure out? And again, I'm not trying to put the technology before the strategy, because I
Sure.
feel like I've got a pretty good handle on my strategy. But then I say, well, yeah, what's possible?
Yeah. I will, this is not the answer you want, but the answer is it depends. And I'll give you an example in your
Hey,
specific case.
I'm an attorney. I get to use that one, not you.
Attorneys and economists, we love using it. But let me give you an example. If you're an attorney, I have, and this may not be you, but I have a friend who's an attorney who is in a very specific area of the market, and he spends quite a bit on Google ads, okay, to get his particular clients. He does, what do you call that? Tax planning. So a big part of his business is finding people on the internet. That's a place where, you know, I see stuff, little applications all the time, and more we're seeing software that you can buy. I have a software application that I used in a company that was spending a couple $1 million a year in Google ads. It cost me less than $100 a month, and it was doing all of this. It was monitoring all of my ads. Every morning I would get a recommendation, and it would say, here's how I think you should change bids on your ads. And would you like me to change it for you? And literally every morning it was 14 suggestions. I'd say, yes, yes, no, no, yes, yes. Or it would say, here's an opportunity I'm seeing out there. Do you think we ought to write an ad around this topic? And this thing was amazing. It was $100 a month. And
What's the service?
It was, I knew you were going to ask, because I haven't used it in 8 months. It is called, I will find it and send it out through Taylor again. I always mess up the name.
It's called Carry On.
Nope, it's not. It has nothing to do with us. I will find it, but I literally replaced a person that was making $40,000 a year, and this thing, the individual had I didn't replace. He quit, and we ended up using this software. We ended up using a consultant for a little while and moved to this software. This individual was making about $40,000 a year, and we replaced him entirely with this software, and the costs on our ads dropped by almost 50% within 2 months compared to a human. So there's stuff out there. If you're doing HR, all kinds of crazy stuff in HR that's fully automated. You can just go rent the software right now. And there's a few other areas where you can find stuff. So if you have specific areas, yeah, let me know. I'm happy to share any that I am aware of. But we're in this weird stage where a lot of it is, you know, most of it is not automated, and we're still inventing stuff, but there are a few really innovative companies out there that have stuff on the shelf now that you can get cheap.
Thanks.
Pete, do you want to share your question and some context there?
Sure, and thanks for doing this, Tim. This is great. My question was just around that incremental and iterative approach where you say that you know, trying to bite off everything at once and do it over 6 to 9 months leads to that transformation burnout. Do you recommend taking one piece of that solution or stack and kind of doing that fully? Or do you prefer to take an approach where you kind of do a testing environment, you kind of sandbox it, maybe benchmark that against what you have been doing first as an initial step before you fully deploy?
I do both of those. It really just depends. I hate this answer, the answers I'm giving, because I'm saying yes to everything, but I take both of those approaches. Occasionally we will say, let's do one thing really well. Like in the example of the, let me find it here. This example here. Oh, well, in the example of the product packaging company, we decided if all we could do is have a fully developed price estimator, well, that's still valuable, because then even if it's still a human on the phone, the human can answer the question, take the call, plug in a couple things, and say, well, I'm guessing the best price is this. So does that meet your budget? And then he can get an instant answer, he or she can get an instant answer on, is that even in the customer's budget? The current way of doing things is they get to answer all those questions, and then they throw it out to all of their suppliers, and 3 months later or 3 weeks later they get an answer. At least then they can get an answer of, is this even in the customer's budget? And so just that one little feature alone saves a ton of time, even though the rest of it isn't automated. So in that case, we're going to dive deep and go on one thing. In the segmentation, in the other example, the telco, we're still in prototype, and we will probably be in prototype for 6 months, because the prototype itself threw off enough new information as just a one-time thing that even without it being in a live environment, they've got now 6 months of work based on what they've seen already.
And Tim, if I could just follow on to that,
Yeah.
is it more important to take that approach as a means to validate the technology, or is it more important in having that more manageable bite size, if you will, in helping it be incorporated into the functioning of the company, which is obviously made up of human beings?
Yeah, and again, the answer is both, but here's one is we can validate the technology honestly pretty quickly with the right amount of data. The biggest issue is the CEO. I've always found is, and here's how this stuff usually plays out in a lot of companies is someone in the tech department or IT wants to get into AI, or they want to do something cool, or they have an idea, and good for them. They've got a great idea, and so they go play around with it. They convince someone to give them a little budget to buy some technologies, do some stuff, and they're super excited. And then after it's done, they go show the CEO. And that's the first time that the technology has met the CEO's brain. And in the CEO's brain, that he's thinking strategy, and a lot of times they're thinking, what does this have to do with our core strategy? And then everyone gets discouraged when he throws it out and says, great, I love that you did something AI, but well, I don't know what to do with that. So the answer is usually it's the human part that is the problem. I like having quick wins and winning over CEOs' hearts and minds and showing what can happen. I like quick wins with dollars attached to them, to be blunt, because we're in this experimental phase right now where most executives don't know what can happen. And if I can't show them dollars in 90 days, they lose interest. And so to be blunt, one of the places we usually prefer to start is in customer churn. And that's not the core strategy for every company, but I can show monetary improvement, material financial improvement in customer churn in less than 90 days. And every CEO is wowed by how much money we can make them in that fast. And so sometimes I'll stretch that strategy and I'll encourage them to throw churn in as one of the core capabilities. But I always try to focus on a quick, financially impactful win.
Tim, one of my questions was along those lines in terms of identifying the data capabilities of companies. What is the best way for a company? I mean, I'm looking at like Jeff's question and Shane's question, like going through that analysis, what is the best way, or what are some of the places companies should look to identify their data capabilities so they can start doing what you just said?
Let me go back to that. Can you still see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just find it here quickly. So a lot of companies start here and they start saying, what data do we even have? Like I said, I actually do not like starting there because I don't care what capabilities you have. If you're going to survive, you got to figure out what capabilities you need. It's the old Wayne Gretzky quote, you got to go where the puck's, how's it go? You got to know where the puck's going, not where it's been. And so most companies start here because they ask themselves, what data do we even have? I don't like starting there. And so, in fact, I don't know if I'm answering your question again, Taylor, but I don't like evaluating their current data capacity. I like evaluating their strategic, vision for the world. and then figuring out how data can fit in. And inevitably, in having that discussion, we'll find 2 or 3 new ways they hadn't thought of, where I can say, well, here's some other ways, given what you've shown me, that you could change your strategy, or you might consider changing your strategy. Some companies are finding they need to gut the whole company and become a data company. And that's the most valuable asset they have. So I'll give you an example. That telco company, they were showing us all these ideas about what they want to do and how data could improve their strategy. And the first thing I showed them is, do you realize that you're monitoring every millions of people and the websites they visit? I said, the financial value of that alone, trading in the stock market, is worth more than your entire company. And so we'll throw out ideas like that. And some companies will try to change their strategy. But I don't like talking about data before we or even evaluating their capabilities before we talk about strategy, because their capabilities don't matter until you know what the strategy is. Is that a fair way to answer it?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. Anybody have any other questions before we head out for today? You can unmute yourself if you do. Awesome. Well, Tim, thanks so much. I know we had a couple of requests about the presentation and being able to send that out. I'll connect with you on what you would like to send to the group, and really appreciate your time and the presentation today.
Absolutely. It's good to meet all of you. And like I said, I'm more than happy to do phone calls. I enjoy talking with entrepreneurs, even when I don't get paid for it. So happy to point any ideas I can out to you.
Perfect. Well, everybody, feel free to connect with Tim and Landon at Carry On if you would like to follow up with them, either via LinkedIn or Tim put his contact information up. But look forward to chatting with everybody next week. Thanks for coming.